Thank you very much for the introduction. Hello everyone, my name is Gosbert, and in that introduction is actually the curse of having the name Gosbert. It being unusual means I'm easily found, and when he read that I was thinking, where's that written, where's that written? It's actually on my LinkedIn, which I do need to change, but nonetheless. Now, welcome all. I'm going to talk today about success, and failure. Now realize today all of us here are connected by the fact we are all in some way entrepreneurial. Whether you're running your own business, whether you're working with an organization and you have entrepreneurial spirit, or perhaps you're at the dreaming stage. That's what connects us all. And these two terms, success and failure, despite being the opposite of each other, are intimately connected. And over the last 10 years, I've had the pleasure of working for and working with some great organizations. That has taken me across youth entrepreneurship, so working with young enterprise, and that was a great chance to support young people as they took their first steps into business. Both over to startups. I worked on Backer for about 3 years, and that really took from a team of 6, growing it to a team of 12, and its eventual folding and closing, which I'll be touching upon later on. Now, throughout these experiences, one thing I have got is I've worked with some amazing people. And I was thinking about success and failure, and thinking about it again and again, and what does it actually mean? And I was reflecting, and I think I'm old enough now to say back in the day. I think I'm qualified now. I look young. But nonetheless, I was thinking about some of the services and some of the businesses that I used frequently when I was a teenager. Now, if I can cast your minds back to the early 2000s and something we called LimeWire. Does everyone remember LimeWire? Yeah, LimeWire. And Napster. Everyone remember that? Yep. Yes. Now, that was all the days where we all collectively stole music from the artists that we loved.
My friend did it.
Yeah, friend did it. Now, when we think about those businesses, they allowed us to share files illegally at the time, and those businesses were successful. They had millions of users. Today, they would be the unicorns of the time. But it was also in that success, it was also their failure. Why? Because those businesses soon collapsed under an avalanche of copyright infringement and lawsuits. Now, what I want to think about is that those businesses failed, but they opened the door for what we have today, which is legal in some cases, which is our iTunes, our Spotifys, and our other illegal file-sharing services which can't be shut down because the technology is 10 times better. Now, what I want us to think about today, and what I will share with you, is a series of both successes, but most importantly, the failures. Failures which at times have made me feel lonely, have made me feel like I don't know what I'm doing, or made me feel like no one understands exactly what I'm going through. Now, the first stop on our journey tonight is what I like to call, and which I created, and I'm going to ask all of you to use your imaginations as you join me, the Museum of Failure. Now, failure is a very funny word because it's fluid. What we fail at today may be something which we succeed or use to succeed in the future. Now, my first feeling of failure, as it were, was when I was 16 years old. Now, you can imagine me, I dressed very, very different when I was 16 years old. There's one thing I loved when I was 16 was hip-hop. Absolutely loved it. In fact, I lived it. Imagine me with much baggy trousers, an NBA basketball jersey, a t-shirt underneath, and a fitted cap. That was me, and Air Force Ones. Now, that was me when I was 16, and at 16, your employment opportunities are quite limited, but you know what you love. Anyway, me and a friend, we actually set up, at the time, it was a small eBay shop. We'd found a supplier in Japan who would print us out-of-print hip-hop CDs. Now, for those that don't know what out-of-print means, out-of-print essentially means they weren't being printed anymore, but this supplier had a stash of various hip-hop CDs. I'm talking, for those that know, the old Raucous records, early 2000s, Mos Def, Talib Kweli, all that good stuff, but music meant something. Again, I'm old enough to say that now. Now, we would sell these CDs online at eBay at a right premium. And for a couple of years, this was my main source of income, and it felt good. Why? Because it was my own money. It didn't come from the bank of mum, who, through this period, still provided food, clothing, shelter, etc., that she should provide. Now, what I want to think about is that during that period, we made money. It was never a business. We were simply doing what we loved and what we knew about. I guess I wasn't smart enough to get a job selling shoes at Foot Locker. That was out of my range. But one thing I did know about American mid-90s East Coast hip-hop. Now, there's something that killed that business during that time, and it was the emergence of wide-scale broadband. Now, how does broadband affect my niche hip-hop eBay business, which me and my friends set up and run for 2 years? Well, and it came back to bite us, all of this rare music we had suddenly was available to everyone and anyone online. All these rare CDs you could suddenly download at the speed of a click. Does anyone remember the times when downloading music, downloading an album meant turning on your computer, starting the download, going to sleep, then coming back and hoping that the file hadn't corrupted during the night? Tim remembers, obviously. The older people in the audience remember. Now, that was my first experience of failure. Relative failure, but again, I dusted it off and I did what some young people do. I went to uni and forgot all about it. Now, it was a few years later, I had my first job working at Young Enterprise, and part of that job was to speak in front of audiences. So I'd speak in front of 300 to 400 young people and convince them why they had to listen to me for the day. Now, after I left that job, me and a friend came up with an idea. We speak for a living. So what we're going to do, we are going to teach people how to speak. Simple enough. People say that public speaking is the #1 fear, right? People say, some people fear it more than death. So we thought, what a great idea. We'll just train people to speak. Wrong. Now, we wore our best suits. We rented some expensive central London venues. Great. We're experienced speakers. We know how to do this. First session we ran, we were there, we were suited and booted, we looked great. No one turned up. In fact, I think we had 5 people attend our sessions. And we learned something from that. Apart from me and my friend falling out at the time, we're now reconciled. It was an experience which I couldn't understand. I had a skill. The same way I loved hip-hop. I knew how to speak in public, and I thought I could teach others. It simply didn't work. Now, as we take our last stop on the Museum of Failure, it was more recently. Over the last 3 years, I had the pleasure of working on a startup. It was called Backer. Now, what we intended to do, we intended to be almost the LinkedIn of employment. But instead of LinkedIn being just an online platform, we hosted a series of meetups. Great idea, right? Meet the people that you want to be like. If you want to be a doctor, come to our events, meet doctors. If you want to be a mechanical engineer, come and meet us, meet the right people. Now, we poured 3 years of blood, sweat, and some tears and a lot of pitching into this project. And one thing it taught me was the difference between building the right thing, which was a social network, and designing the right thing and building the thing right. Because after 3 years, our funding got pulled. Now, Backer was a great project. I put a lot of blood and sweat and tears. I learned how to launch a social network, how to growth hack, and I must just caveat that. Growth hacking is a very funny word. It's essentially the ability to hustle, to get the word out there, to make sure that people know who you are and they come to your events, they buy your product, they use your service. Now, again, these 3 failures left me feeling, again, lonely, like I didn't know what I was doing, and that simply no one understood exactly what I was going through. And I had a lot of time to really reflect on this. Now, if I've taken anything from those lessons, is this, is that confidence in your own ideas is key. The confidence in not just your own ideas, but more importantly, who you are. And if I look what's come from these failures and these experiences, I look to some of the things that I've been involved with now. When I set up a company to teach people how to present and how to speak in public, one thing I never had an angle. It was, come to speak in public. We will teach you how to effectively command an audience. What we found, no one would pay for that. In the preceding years, what I happened to do is work with a lot of business founders, a lot of people who have not just got dreams of starting their business, but have got dreams of developing it. That's led me to actually begin coaching people who are actually starting up. Recently, I worked with a woman who gave a TED talk in South Africa. It was her first experience, 19 minutes, no notes, speaking in front of an audience of over 1,000. We took her from complete nervousness to complete confidence and stage command over a number of weeks. I'm good, but I'm not that good. But what this experience has given me and what the failures have taught me is that you need to target things. Just teaching people to speak isn't good enough. What's your angle? Who are you working with? Is it founders? Is it business execs? Is it startup founders? And that brings me to the second point, working with an incubator. All the lessons I learned working on Backer, all the mistakes, everything that we experienced has now benefited other startups. I recently worked on an 8-week startup called Innovation for Development, which is focused on coaching businesses that want to launch in Africa. I met an amazing group of people. But again, all got different ideas, and the experience and the failures that I've made are now of use. And amazingly, people will now pay for that information. And lastly, universities and graduate employment. Last year, I did a long-term project working with a university in South London on how can they improve the employability of their graduates. Why? Because I set up a social network which focused on getting people into work, exploring new avenues. What I realize now is that the failures are of value. And that's something I want to share with the audience today. All of us, whether you're entrepreneurial, intrapreneurial, or whether you're a dreamer, have been through something. All of our failures are very relative, right? We all had different experiences. But I want to think about this. Your failures are your fuel. They're the things that are valuable because they're unique. They're unique to you. And your failures will can inform you moving forward. Every mistake I've ever made, every misjudgment, every guess that was incorrect is actually something which I can actually use to inform the way moving forward. Whether you grew up in London, whether you grew up outside of London, whatever your background is, this is the real fuel that you can use in order to power your own future. Now, the lessons from those experiences and what's come afterwards, I have to credit to a certain group of people. Normally, people speak about business heroes. They may mention Tim, for example. They may mention other people, Branson, the names, Mark Zuckerberg, those great lessons. But there are a group of people who I do need to mention specifically. Now, I was on a tube the other day, and I was on the Central Line, and it was quite late at night. And I bumped into a young lady. I sort of half recognized her. I have a habit of remembering people's faces. And I said, I've met you a few years ago, I just can't place you. Now, I met her about 5 years ago when I was working for Young Enterprise. And her and her friends had set up a business in northwest London. When I say business, it was a real hustle, actually. I think they were importing mobile phone chargers at the time, and they were selling them on for a great markup. And I was quite impressed by this at the time. But they never claimed to be the best business people. And in fact, I have a picture of them. Yeah, there they are. Now, it's the lady in the middle I bumped into, and we had a brief conversation. And I realized that these three young ladies provided me a great lesson on success and failure. They never claimed to have the best business brains. They never claimed to have the best business minds or even have the best appetite. But there was something that they had which I've always remembered. Apart from having quite a nifty product. Now, technology changes a lot in 5 years. And at the time, they were selling these. Does everyone aware what these are? These are mobile phone power banks. Now, 5 years ago, when smartphones, I guess smartphone penetration wasn't the same as it is now, they were selling these. I wasn't the most enthused when I saw this product. I thought, this is crazy. 5 years later, everyone has one. To have a smartphone without a mobile power bank is almost seen as crazy. In fact, the first accessory you go and seek out once you get a smartphone is, can I get my mobile charger? I even think EE are giving them away for free if you go into their shops. Now, they had a product at the time which I saw as misplaced. And again, they never ever had the best business ideas or business brains, but there's something that they did have which I've seen now as unmistakable and which I've seen in many good startups, many good founders, many good business people. What they had, and these are the key words which I've really taken from their experience, is that they had confidence in their idea. They were never apologetic about what they wanted to do, and I've seen that again in some of the people here tonight. There is no apology that they don't know the product or the product isn't ready. They had total confidence. And most importantly, and this is something I want to drive home tonight, they valued their experience. Now, the reason I put experience in inverted commas is this. They were negotiating with a supplier out in Guangzhou in China. They were 18 years old. I guess Guangzhou is the place where you go to negotiate with suppliers of this type. And they had a problem with getting their products to London on time. And I asked them, and they were from Wembley in northwest London. And I asked them, okay, so are you sure you guys are going to be okay negotiating? And the response from the lady in the middle of the previous picture was timeless. She said, well, Goss, I'm from Wembley, innit? Now, we know how to deal with this. We know how to deal with this sort of stuff. They valued their own experience. If there's something that I've noticed coaching business founders and startup leaders is that often as adults, we undervalue what we've actually been through in life. One, because we all think that we're normal, and this is easy to fall into, or we think that our experience isn't unique, isn't worth speaking about. That group of young ladies valued their experience. They knew Wembley like the back of their hand. They knew where the factories were, where in Southall you can source cheap plastic keyrings. If anyone's looking for them, come speak to me at the end. We can have a word. But it had great value. And apart from that experience, they hustled. Now, this word hustled has many meanings, but I like to think of it as a healthy disrespect for the impossible. The man behind the camera over there, Troy. I met Troy when I was running a startup. And Troy, in a way, sort of hustled me. And Troy, I don't mean this in a bad way, but nonetheless, Troy kept in touch, sometimes annoyingly, but he kept in touch. And when it came time for me to think, you know what, Troy, I need to film a talk because this needs to go on the YouTube channel. Troy was the first name that I thought of. He kept in touch. He valued his own experience. He was confident in what he could do and what he could provide. And when it came time for me to think, you know what, I need someone to film, Troy was one of the first names that I actually thought of. And I think there's a final point which these ladies actually showed me, and it's something which I think everyone in this room, and I see the great spirit here tonight, that can take away. They were never afraid to ask. Now, adults, as we get older, we get experience, and there's certain things that we can't ask anymore for fear of being found out as silly. That feeling of putting your hand up in class when it seems like it's an obvious question. I liken it to the feeling of going into class on a Monday morning and feeling like there was classes on Saturday that you missed, that there was something that you missed. But these ladies were never, ever afraid. Now, I realized the work of the Bright Ideas Trust, aside from just being a trust where people can seek startup support and get their business ideas off the ground, there's something key in the process, which is mentoring. And I find this an important part of any process, the ability to ask. These ladies, not just their experience, not just the fact they hustled, but they were always open to asking if they didn't know anything. The amount of emails I received on a Friday, starting with, "Yo, Goss, comma, to be fair, we need help with this." They were often clear on what they wanted, even if they didn't know it. We're having trouble. Now, the ability to ask, the ability to hustle, to value your own experience, whatever that is, as well as finally, being able to have confidence in your own idea, not be apologetic, is often what I've seen has helped people transition from failure to success. And what I want to leave you with tonight is to really think about your own journey. What experience have you been on? Earlier, I spoke to someone who's worked in farming, an industry which I know nothing about, but something was unique to his value, his experience. Think about your own hustle, and most importantly, think about those areas that you're unsure about. What's your ask? And finally, seek out those who have the answers. Thank you very much. Okay, I think the one myth that we work on is that people are brilliant just overnight. So to actually drill yourself into actually, whatever it is, whatever your topic is, to actually take the time to actually drill yourself on it. And when I mean practice, 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 practice again. There's something that we did. She lived in Bermondsey, and one activity we did, if anyone's ever been to Bermondsey, there's Bermondsey Street Park, and lots of buses go past, it's very public. I had her practice in public on a Saturday afternoon on the grass in front of everyone. Not that everyone was watching, but people did come over and say, "What's going on?" Now that got over the nerves. The nerves are all in her head. So what I definitely say is practice, practice. We must have gone over that. I know it by heart, my goodness, and it's 19 minutes. So, because what I do want to say is that, we mentioned, can we talk about Dragon's Den?
Yeah, do what you want.
We can talk about the illusion is often that the people who pitch on Dragon's Den have been brilliant overnight, when in fact they probably had coaching themselves or they've had some sort of training. And that's something I work on with any client I do approach. Growth hacking. Now, the definition is fairly fluid, but growth hacking is your ability to get your product or service out there, to grow, whether it's acquiring users. I spent 3 years working on a social network. Now, in that case, it was to get both the awareness of our social network out there, but also to acquire users quickly, without the huge marketing budgets of Facebook or Google. So and if you think about it, we all do growth hacking in our own ways, in our lives. If you have children, you're growth hacking constantly. How do I get them to do this quickly? How do we get that over the line? That's what growth hacking is. Depending on your industry, it can move. They can find me via my website, which I'll provide details of. But that is a key question, and that's been a hard lesson as well, especially working on a freelance basis. What I've often found is that positioning is key. That simply speaking doesn't mean anything to anyone. Everyone thinks it's a good idea, but no one will buy into it. There's no value there. What I've learned is to target it. So initially, I was working with incubators and startup founders, so early stage startup founders. I approached several incubators and we worked out partnerships. So I was actually providing a service as part of their incubator program, usually towards the end when people are thinking about pitching for money.